Name's Luke. I'm a senior. I study economics and political science. I want to thank the lovely, I think mostly gentlemen to my right, and I'm sorry, it's been a long-going joke for me. For not you, but the composition. For allowing me this opportunity to speak. There are a lot of faces, familiar faces in the crowd, a lot of unfamiliar faces, but they're all friendly. I'm not going to wax poetic anymore. Anyways, topic of my discussion is, or at least the jumping off point for the discussion is value in economics. I wrote a paper for a Marxism class on the labor theory of value, which we'll get into right now. So, how many of you are economics majors? So most of you. All right, and as you probably know, you've been taught a certain school of economics in our classes, what I would dub to be the neoclassical school. It's basically market competition as a baseline and using that as a model to observe and make sense of economic realities in the actual world. But it wasn't always neoclassical, right? It wasn't always marginal utility. It wasn't always imperfect competition, monopoly, and oligopoly, and all those models that have been ingrained in us, like in 6 different classes, right? And before that school of thought emerged, really at the turn of the 20th century, you had a series, and really before economics emerged as a distinct social science, you had a series of what I would use the term philosophers that wrote on a number of subjects, including what we would now dub economics. And the 3 notable thinkers and writers that I'd like to focus initially on are Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Karl Marx, right? And it might be surprising to see them clumped under the same school of thought, economics, someone like Adam Smith and Karl Marx, because we traditionally ascribe to Smith as the forefather of modern economics, and Karl Marx is the boogeyman in the corner. But upon reading their actual works and delving into their philosophy, you notice there are a lot of similarities. Smith and Marx weren't writing at the same time. Marx was, I think, probably about 50 years his senior, or later in time. But they were combating with, the same ideas, and at the foundation of all of these thinkers, the thing that they were able to build a system upon was this idea of value. What is it? One, what is value? And 2, how does it affect sort of the economic decisions we make? And what's the importance, the moral importance of how it is we define value? So, bringing up with Smith, or before we get into this, if we were to think of today in value, I would tell you it's what it is as, the value that I place on a good is what it is that I would be willing to pay for it, right? So I bought a cup of coffee earlier today for $3. It was an expensive cup of coffee. It's good. I willingly did that. I value that cup of coffee at $3, right? Why is that the case? Does it have something to do with how it was made? Is it entirely within my own volition that I just value coffee at $3? Today, I think the prevailing thought is it's very subjective. This is what I value. My willingness to pay. We see it in our supply and demand graphs all the time. But it wasn't always the case, right? And the prelude to the more subjective theories of values was a labor theory of value, which basically stipulated that the source of value in the world, and something can only be made valuable through the application of some sort of labor, right? So if you read John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, within the first few chapters, it's this really phenomenal document about God having given the earth to humans as something for us to make of, for something for us to use, and we get value by actually working that land, right? So you had this labor theory of property, that upon working something, it becomes under my dominion, right? Contrasted, or similarly, a labor theory of value, what Smith was talking about, and I think he probably provides the most holistic picture of value, is this division between pre-market society and modern society. So pre-market society being characterized by natural prices, the rent of the land, the wages of labor, the profits of the stock employed, very supply-side-esque as determining what is the value of this thing, but at the same time recognizing that on the other half of the equation, what it is that I as a consumer want also has some play. He didn't. I don't think personally he articulated the demand side of a theory of value enough, but then again, such were the times, you know. So if we think about like a labor theory of value, as Ricardo outlines, the value of the commodity depends on the quantity of labor necessary to its production, which could be said to be, which you could say to be the compensation which is paid for that labor, though not necessarily so. And this is it's a very, if you try and, it's very anachronistic. It's a rigid doctrine, right? So like, you put labor into something, and that is the source of that value, right? Marx, and I'll give you the basic, Marxism 101 primer. Marx took that idea, that labor theory of value, and concocted a broader theory of the demise of capitalism, right? So if you think of value of a good coming from labor, I work it, and it's weird to talk about it, but like labor is like a part of me that I embed in this good, right? It's not an action, it's an actual thing that I put into like this, like pencil that I make. There's labor embedded in it, right? And that's where its value comes from. And you can start to make profit off of that value or the existence of profit given a labor theory of value can only exist if I, the laborer, am not being compensated for the value that I put into it, right? So if I put $5 of value into this, good, and I only receive $4 in return from my employer's made $1 profit off of me, right? And Marx noted, and you can't take this out of the context of the Industrial Revolution and what he was witnessing in Europe, and like the very lowly manner of the industrial class, the proletariat at that time. And he recognized that as the source of value being labor, that laborers weren't being compensated in return for what they're putting into this thing, right? So they're being paid solely to reproduce themselves, right? Working to eat, eating to work, whereas through I would say no fault, or whereas working to eat and eating to work, whereas owners, through the fact that they own the means of production, are extracting something from this worker, extracting almost a part of this worker because, because labor is, in this sense, a thing. So taking a part of that thing from the worker in the source of profit, right? That said, capitalists compete too, right? And if we're constantly, if the only source of profit is labor, and capitalists are competing for one another, you're going to see the phenomenon of falling profits, right? Because we're constantly competing, we have to undercut one another. And he used that phenomenon that he was witnessing to draw up this theory of the inevitable demise of capitalism. The paper that I wrote, The Fall of the Labor Theory of Value, took a look at just that, the labor theory of value and its inadequacies. And it examined the kind of what I wittily called a marginal revolution. It's a stupid economics joke. Took a look at this thing that happened a century ago, which is really prodded on by thinkers like John Bentham, like John Stuart Mill. There's an ongoing debate whether the marginal revolution prodded neoclassical economics or utilitarianism prodded neoclassical economics. I don't really know much about the debate. I'm not interested in getting into it. But the important part is that this was a profound it was a profound step to like the side of what the conventional thought of the day was. So no longer is labor, or no longer is value a thing that comes from laborers, but it's subjectivized, right? So before we have value as an objective source derived from people working, And now it's at the discretion of what it is that I, as a consumer, want, right? So I have like this good gives me this marginal utility, it makes me this much better, therefore, assuming it outweighs whatever I have to give up in return for it, I do it, right? And I continue that behavior until the costs and the benefits equate one another. And it provided a really, in my opinion, a very strong response to some of the inadequacies of Marxism and the labor theories of value. It's the stuff that you learn in class. And in my paper, I highlighted two things, one of which I'll discuss. Namely that the labor theory of value, if we equate value and